Hi there, and welcome to the Somewhere Between Here and Healing podcast. I'm Viv, your host and fellow traveler on this journey of navigating life after growing up with a narcissistic parent. Together, we'll explore the messy, the funny, and the downright unbelievable stories of family, life, and self discovery. Please let it be known I am not a therapist nor claim to be an expert in any way. I am simply someone who's been through it, still figuring things out, and I'm here to share my story with you. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's get this thing started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to take a quick moment to remind you that I am not a therapist or a mental health expert. What I'm sharing comes from my own experiences growing up with a narcissistic parent and years of researching, trying to make sense of it all. While I'll do my best to explain things clearly as I understand them, please consult a qualified professional for deeper insights or support. So, okay, let's get into it. Today, we're talking about narcissism and narcissistic abuse. What is it? What does it look like? And how does it affect people who live through it? This is a topic that's deeply personal to me, and probably to many of you too. Most of you that are here probably have some sort of idea what it is and what it looks like for you, whether you've dealt with a narcissistic parent, partner, friend, or boss, or whether you are new to narcissism. I hope this episode helps shed some light on a behavior that can feel incredibly confusing and damaging. So, what is narcissism? Let's start with the basics. Narcissism is a word we've all heard, and it often gets tossed around in casual conversations, sometimes as an insult or a way to describe someone who seems full of themselves. You might remember Lux Luthor, the self proclaimed living legend, the wrestler who strutted into the ring as if the entire arena existed just to witness his greatness. Now, he wasn't just a wrestler, he was an event, or at least that's what he told anyone willing to listen. His entrances were longer than most matches, bathed in golden light and deafening pyrotechnics, because a mere spotlight wasn't enough. And he didn't just win, he allowed victories to happen. And if he lost, well, that was never his fault. Maybe the ref was biased, maybe his opponent cheated, or maybe, just maybe, the fans hadn't cheered loudly enough to power his greatness. Lux didn't shake hands. He didn't acknowledge rivals as equals, and he certainly never admitted weakness. He wasn't here to wrestle. He was here to be worshipped. But in reality, narcissism exists on a spectrum. At its extreme, it can lead to narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, a condition defined by specific traits and behaviors. Now, not everyone with narcissistic tendencies has NPD or is diagnosed with it, of course. Some people might have strong narcissistic traits without meeting the criteria for a full diagnosis. That said, even those with traits can have a big impact on the people around them. For me, narcissism isn't just a concept, it's something I've lived with. At its core, narcissism is about an inflated sense of self importance, an insatiable need for admiration, a lack of empathy, and struggles forming healthy relationships. And growing up, I saw firsthand how these traits could shape a person's behavior and ripple out into their relationships. Narcissistic people often see themselves as superior to others and will do whatever it takes to maintain that image, even if it means exploiting those closest to them. What are some of the traits of a narcissistic person, you might be wondering? Before we dive into the classic traits of narcissism, let's do a quick vibe check. If you've ever met someone who never apologizes, but somehow you're the one saying sorry, someone who acts like the main character in every situation and you, just an extra in their personal movie. Someone who collects admiration like it's a full time job, but constructive criticism, oh, that's illegal in their world. Someone who can twist reality so well that they could write Inception to Gaslight Boogaloo. Or someone who loves to play the victim, even when they're the one who set the house on fire. Well, congrats. You've encountered someone with one of these traits or multiple? Then you might have encountered a narcissist. But don't worry, you're not alone. These behaviors can be confusing, frustrating, and downright exhausting. But once you recognize them, you can start to untangle the mess. So let's break it down trait by trait. 1. Grandiosity. The narcissist is always the most important person in the room, or at least in their own mind. They exaggerate achievements, act like they're destined for greatness, and often dismiss anyone who doesn't play along. Example: your dad constantly brags about being the smartest person at work, yet he's been passed over for promotions for years. But of course, that's never his fault, right? It's always someone else holding them back. 2. Entitlement. Rules, guidelines, social norms, those are for other people. Narcissists expect special treatment simply because they exist. For example, your mom throws a full blown tantrum when she has to wait for a table at a restaurant because someone like her shouldn't have to wait with common folk. 3. Lack of empathy. Other people's feelings barely register to a narcissist. They don't acknowledge them and they definitely don't care. For example, you tell them you've had a rough day, hoping for some support, but instead you're hit with, "You think you've had a bad day? Let me tell you about mine," and completely hijack the conversation. 4. Need for admiration. Compliments are their lifeline. If a narcissist is not being praised, they're withering. For example, your partner constantly fishes for compliments, how attractive, smart, or talented they are. And if they don't get it, cue the sulking, passive aggression, or full blown meltdown. 5. Manipulation. A narcissist will twist situations to serve their own needs using guilt, deception, or straight up mind games. For example, your friend forgets their wallet every time you go out, conveniently, but somehow always has cash for things that they actually care about. 6. Envy. Other people's success is either a personal insult or something that the narcissist needs to downplay. For example, you finally achieve something huge, and instead of acknowledging your hard work, your sibling might shrug and say, "Must be nice to get lucky." 7. Arrogance. A narcissist genuinely believes they're superior and have no problems looking down onto others. Example: your boss mocks employees for making minor mistakes, acting like he's above it all, even though he's made worse ones himself. And 8, fragile self esteem. Underneath all that confidence, paper thin ego. They act like they're untouchable, but the smallest criticism sends a narcissist spiraling. Example: you gently correct a tiny mistake, and instead of taking it in stride, they explode, accuse you of attacking them, and suddenly they're the victim. Now, these traits can start small, often slipping under the radar in ways that feel harmless or that are easy to overlook. But as time goes on, they can take over, shaping a person's behavior and how they interact with others. Growing up with a narcissistic father, I did experience this firsthand. At first, it's easy to be drawn in by the confidence and the moments that feel like genuine care. But beneath that polished surface, other patterns begin to emerge and even worsen over time. Control, manipulation, and patterns that can leave you constantly questioning what's real. It can be a slow unraveling, and the confusion it creates can be overwhelming trying to make sense of it all. Now, that being said, not all narcissists are the same. Your experiences, while likely similar, can vary depending on the narcissist in your life, your relationship to and with them, the type or types of narcissist they are, and of course, your overall situation in general. There are several different types of narcissists that are commonly recognized. See if any of these sound familiar to you. 1. The grandiose or overt narcissist. These are what we would consider the stereotypical narcissists: outgoing, charismatic, and often very successful. They do like to be the center of attention and thrive on admiration. However, their charm and charisma often mask manipulative and self serving behaviors. 2. The vulnerable or covert narcissist. Unlike grandiose, vulnerable narcissists may appear shy or insecure, even. They can often feel victimized, harbor resentment, and use passive aggression to manipulate others. Their narcissism is more inward focused, but can be just as damaging. 3. Malignant narcissists. This type combines narcissistic traits with antisocial behaviors. Malignant narcissists can be abusive, controlling, and even sadistic. This type is more likely to ultimately engage in deliberate harm to others. 4. Communal narcissist. These individuals get their sense of self-worth from being seen as unselfish or moral. For example, they may do volunteer work or donate to charity, but their motivation is often self-serving. While they want the recognition, they don't want genuine connection. And 5. Hypervigilant narcissists. Hypervigilant narcissists are constantly on the lookout for criticism or rejection. They have an extreme fear of rejection and may find socializing painful, often interpreting interactions through the lens of perceived slights or insults. Growing up with a narcissistic father was both confusing and deeply impactful. In fact, I had no idea what words to even put to certain actions and patterns until well into my 30s. On the surface, he was charming, successful, and larger than life. People in and outside our family admired him, drawn to his charisma and seemingly endless accomplishments. He always wanted to appear to be perfect in everything he did and put out there. However, at home, he would remind us of his sacrifices at every opportunity and expect respect, gratitude, and fierce loyalty. His lack of empathy was another defining trait for me, something I think I really noticed or recognized more deeply in later years. Now, I obviously can't speak for my siblings or other family members and friends, but if I had a problem or needed emotional support, the conversation would almost always shift back to him. My feelings and experiences didn't seem to matter unless they served his narrative in some way. And this constant invalidation left me questioning my own worth and reality to this day. There was also a vast emotional distance that defined our relationship as father and daughter. As a young child, I would try to hug or show affection, only to be pushed away. Those rejections stung and left a void where warmth and connection should have been. He had a way of using guilt and shame to shape me for as long as I can remember. Every decision or behavior was measured against expectations, and if I fell short, I was made to feel as though I'd failed him, or worse, failed as a person. These tactics of control and manipulation are things that we'll explore more deeply in future episodes. But put simply here, they left a lasting mark on how I viewed myself and my relationships. And like I said, in fact, they still linger to this day. Now, you might have a different narcissist in your life. Now, being close to a narcissist, whether as a child, partner, friend, or coworker, it comes with its own set of challenges. Some of these might sound familiar, and again, you're definitely not alone. So, here's a few dynamics about a narcissist potentially in your life. A parent child dynamic. A narcissistic parent that doesn't see their child as a separate person with their own needs and emotions. Instead, the child is an extension of them, expected to be perfect, meet unrealistic expectations, or even compete with a parent for attention. A romantic relationship. If you've ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, you probably know what it's like to walk on eggshells. You're constantly trying to meet impossible standards, avoid conflict, or keep the peace, often at the extent of your own happiness. Friendship and workplace dynamics. Narcissistic friends and colleagues are often the masters of charm, until they're not. They'll manipulate, take credit for others' work, or use people as stepping stones to climb social or professional ladders. If you've ever had a coworker who somehow always looked good while making you look bad, you might have just been dealing with one. On that note, let's move on and discuss what narcissistic abuse can look like. In a nutshell, narcissistic abuse is a toxic cycle of manipulation, control, and emotional harm inflicted by someone with narcissistic traits. Now, it can be subtle or very obvious, but the result is often the same: confusion, guilt, and a sense of being trapped. Let's break down some of the most common patterns. Gaslighting, a classic narcissistic tactic designed to make you question your own reality. Example: you confront them about something hurtful they said, and they flat out deny it ever happened. They insist that never happened. Or they throw in that classic, "you're too sensitive," after making a cruel remark, turning the blame onto you for reacting instead of owning what they said. Love bombing and devaluation, the emotional roller coaster. Love bombing. At first, they overwhelm you with affection, grand gestures, endless compliments, the works. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I've never felt this way about anyone before. Wow, you feel like you found something really special." But then the switch flips: devaluation. Suddenly, the compliments turn into criticism. They nitpick everything, belittle your achievements, or make you feel unworthy. "You're not as attractive as you used to be. You never get anything right, do you?" The same person who once adored you now makes you question your worth. Control. It's all about power, and they'll use it in ways that seem small at first, but can quickly add up. For example, they criticize your appearance, dictating how you should dress to make you feel insecure. "Why don't you dress more like her?" Or, "You look terrible in that outfit." Or they can isolate you from friends and family as a way of control and by making you feel guilty. "Oh, you always hang out with them and you never make time for me." It starts as something like concern, but can quickly turn into control. Blame shifting. They're never wrong, right? Ever. Say they lose their temper, yell at you, but then somehow blame you for it. "Oh, you made me do this. If you hadn't acted that way, I wouldn't have had to raise my voice." Or if you do call them out on something, they flip the script on you. "You always focus on the negative. Why don't you ever appreciate what I do right?" And suddenly, you find yourself the one on trial. The silent treatment, the ultimate emotional punishment. They can ghost you completely, don't answer texts, won't speak to you for days, leaving you anxious, desperate, and unsure of what you even did wrong, right? And when you ask, they can say, "Oh, well, you should know while I'm not talking to you." Or worse, just continued silence. And finally, triangulation, stirring the pot and keeping you off balance. Triangulation is basically where they can create drama by involving a third party. It happens in families a lot, but a third party for the sake of this. They make you question relationships and they make you feel insecure. "You wouldn't believe what she said about you behind your back. She thinks you're so fake, blah, blah, blah." You then start to distrust that other person and question who's the one controlling the narrative. Well, guess who? The narcissist. You got it. So, why do narcissists act this way? Honestly, I wish I knew, and I think a lot of us do. While there's no single answer, research suggests narcissism comes from a mix of genetics, environment, and psychology. So, here are some of those key factors. One, childhood experiences. Narcissistic traits often stem from early experiences, whether it's with overindulgence, neglect, or inconsistent parenting. For example, a child who is constantly praised for achievements but never given emotional support may grow up believing their worth is tied only to success and not who they are as a person. Two, trauma and defense mechanisms. Some narcissists develop their behaviors as a way to protect themselves from early emotional wounds. If a child grows up with a parent who is cold, dismissive, or outright rejecting, they may build a personality that projects confidence and superiority to cover deep insecurities. Now, I saw this with my father. His own upbringing was marked by emotional neglect. Now, while that doesn't excuse his behavior, it does provide some context for maybe why he became the way he did. And three, genetics and temperament. Some people are naturally more sensitive to criticism or have a competitive streak that, when combined with the right or wrong circumstances, can lead to narcissistic traits. At the core of it, narcissists act the way they do to protect their ego. Deep down, many are likely grappling with feelings of inadequacy or an intense fear of rejection. Their grandiosity, control, and lack of empathy are ways to shield themselves from vulnerability, even if it means hurting others in the process. In my father's case, his need for control and inflated self image always felt like a mask, and one that he couldn't afford to let slip. Finally, let's talk about healing or starting to heal from narcissistic abuse. Recovering from narcissistic abuse is a journey that takes time, effort, and self compassion. It isn't just about moving on, it's about reclaiming your sense of self and creating a life where you feel safe, valued, and whole. So let's explore some key steps to healing, including some of my personal experiences along the way. Understanding and validating your experience. One of the first and most empowering steps in healing is learning about narcissistic abuse. For me, diving into research and reading personal accounts from others who endured similar experiences was life changing. It gave me the language to describe what I'd been through and helped me realize that I wasn't alone or imagining things. When you've been gaslit for years, it's easy to doubt your own reality. Learning about narcissism validated my feelings and experiences. I wasn't crazy or too sensitive. I'd been systematically invalidated and manipulated. Understanding this has helped me release some of the guilt and shame I'd been carrying. Setting boundaries. Setting boundaries is crucial when healing from narcissistic abuse. Boundaries protect your emotional well being and allow you to create a safe space for yourself. For some, this might mean limiting contact with the narcissist. For others, it could mean going no contact entirely. In my case, going no contact with my father was one of the hardest but most necessary decisions I've ever made. It's not about punishing him or pointing a finger, it's about protecting myself. I realize that as long as I allowed him to have access to my life and my feelings, his words and actions would continue to hurt me. Cutting ties gave me the distance I needed to start to heal. Rebuilding your identity. Narcissistic abuse often leaves you questioning who you are. When someone spent years shaping your thoughts, emotions, and decisions to serve their needs, it's very easy to lose sight of your own identity. For me, this is one of the hardest parts of the healing process. Growing up, my sense of self was tied to my father's expectations and approval. After going no contact, I had to ask myself, who am I outside of this influence? What do I value? What actually makes me happy? Rebuilding my identity involves trying new things, reconnecting with old passions, and giving myself permission to live authentically, even if that means disappointing others. Self care and self compassion. Healing from narcissistic abuse requires a lot of self compassion. It's easy to blame yourself for staying too long, not recognizing abuse sooner, or struggling to move on. But the truth is, none of this was your fault. Narcissists are skilled manipulators, and it's their actions, not your responses, that cause the harm. For me, practicing self compassion meant letting go of perfectionism and learning to treat myself with the kindness I'd always craved. I started journaling to process my thoughts, set aside time for activities that brought me joy, and remind myself daily that healing is a journey, not a destination. And finally, seek professional help, of course. Therapy has played a huge role in my healing journey. A good therapist can help you process the trauma, navigate complex emotions, and develop healthier coping strategies. For me, therapy is a space I can speak freely without fear of judgment or invalidation. It is where I start to untangle that web of guilt, anger, and sadness that has been building up over years. If therapy isn't an option, support groups can also be incredibly helpful. And I know there are so many online, Facebook, websites, YouTube, and more. Connecting with others who understand your experiences can provide comfort and a sense of community. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone can make all the difference. When I first went no contact with my father, I was hit with a wave of emotions: relief, guilt, anger, and grief. Relief because I was finally free from that influence, and guilt because I'd been conditioned to believe that setting boundaries made me a bad daughter, a bad person. Anger for all the years I had spent trying to meet these impossible standards, and grief for the relationship I want but just never had. In those early days, I leaned heavily upon my personal support system, a few close friends who listened without judgment and reminded me that I deserve peace too. I also started therapy, as I mentioned, which has become a cornerstone of my healing process. My therapist is helping me reframe my experiences and recognizing the patterns of abuse for what they were, and most importantly, helping me grieve. As time passed, I've started noticing changes in myself. I've stopped apologizing for things that weren't my fault. I spoke up for my needs and prioritized my mental health. And little by little, I began to trust myself again. Gaslighting has made me doubt my own instincts for so long, but rebuilding that trust, even when it takes time, is worth every step. Today, I'm still healing, obviously, and I probably always will be in some way, shape, or form. I have no idea what the near and far future will hold, but I know I am growing, learning, and trying to find joy in ways I never thought possible. If you're on a similar journey, know that it's okay to take things one day at a time. Healing is not a straight path, and setbacks happen, and they happen often. But what matters is that you keep moving forward. And always remember, you're not alone, and I'm here for you too. So, just a few final thoughts to wrap this up. Narcissistic abuse is painful and complicated, yes, but it does not define you. With time, support, and that self compassion, healing is possible, and life can feel lighter and more authentic than ever before. I promise. If nothing else, I hope this episode reminds you that you are not alone in this. Remember, you are not defined by the abuse you endured. You are so much more than that. Thank you once again for joining me today. I hope today's episode has given you some insights into narcissism, narcissistic abuse, and the healing process, or at least what it's starting to look like for me. If you have a story you'd like to share, or if there's a topic you'd like to hear more about, or a question you might have, you know I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out anytime at vivvance@gmail.com. Until next time, take care of you. Viv. Thank you for listening and spending time with me today. I appreciate you all so much. If you haven't already, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and follow me on social media. Your support means the world. Plus, it really helps a podcast grow and reach more people like us. And don't forget, I'd love to hear from you. Send me your questions, share your story, or just drop by to say hello at vivvance@gmail.com. Until next time, remember, healing isn't linear, life can be unpredictable, but you are never alone in this journey. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.